My guest today is Mike Kotsis, a wonderful young coach that I've known for years. And over the years I've known Mike, his focus, zone of genius, and high skill level was in the field of business coaching, business consulting, and he's transformed many small businesses, medium-sized businesses. And the last year and a half, Mike has expanded, changed his focus to a kind of coaching he calls freedom coaching, which I've been exposed to in many conversations with Mike over the last year and a half. It's very exciting, it's very valid, and it is already getting great results with people. So I'm really happy and excited to have Mike talk to us today. So, Mike, let's start here. What had you transform your own work out of strictly business coaching into what you now call freedom coaching?
Thank you, Steve, and thank you for that background. I it's been a journey into freedom coaching. The thing for me when I reflect back on it, that as I was getting really good at goal setting and helping other leaders and entrepreneurs and leadership teams to do that, uh, I was also using a similar framework that we developed for our family. And so we had goals in our family, goals in our business, teaching goals and teaching that. And I realized in our work together, I realized that I developed a warped relationship to goal setting, just a non-useful relationship to it, where I was putting so much energy and emphasis on the attainment of the goal, that I was inadvertently letting that uh, dictate my happiness. So when I attained the goal, I would feel better. I'd feel uplifted. I'd feel relieved. I'd feel good because that's what I expected. And then when I didn't accomplish it, whatever it was, I would feel frustrated, and I'd be like, oh, I would feel a heaviness in my body, uh, and I'm a man of faith, and I believe that that my happiness comes from within me. I've always believed that. But what I saw in that moment a few years ago is I saw a difference between how I was acting and what I believed. And if I already believe that to be true, the happiness is in me, then I don't need to go get anything or accomplish anything to become happier. If I make my bank balance go up or go down like that, that's not an indication of my happiness. If we have more vacation time, or if we have another adventure as a family, that's not an indication. And I saw that differently. I saw it not just intellectually, like I truly felt it at a deeper level, and that changed everything in my perspective.
So, how did you come upon what you now call freedom coaching on a professional level?
I came upon it because I realized I wasn't alone on this journey, that I saw other people, other entrepreneurs, other leaders, other coaches, um, experiencing a similar thing, where we'd get so wrapped up into this version of reality of needing it to go a certain way, whether it's at business or at home. I see very successful entrepreneurs having frustrated home lives, and I see frustrations in their relationships, and those are like little micro examples for me of what I described in my experience of my relationship to goal setting. It's no different. It's a different word, different project. And I started having conversations with people. I started slowing down and having conversations, and I noticed in the language that others are using, that they inadvertently are perpetuating their frustration with the language that they're using. And that's what led me to go deeper in experimenting and working with others in a new way.
Now, I know that you have been on the receiving end of this kind of profound coaching that looks inside, not just on achievement of goals, but looks deep inside for a person's own creativity, inspiration, happiness, well-being, inner peace. You've been on the receiving end of that before you launched your own work in that field. Was that a major factor for you, having
Oh,
experienced
100%.
it?
100%. I mean, even in the work that I've been coaching with you for years, and Steve Hardison and Michael Neal, and I realized that on that journey that I wasn't looking to do this. This is the thing that's it wasn't in my plan. It was all the plans that I've had. There was nothing in my plan. Like I want to go become a one-on-one coach and work in a different way. It never occurred to me. It never dawned on me until I saw something different for myself and until my relationship started shifting and changing in my life with my own family, with Jill, with my kids, with with my parents, with my in-laws. Like everything just started shifting. I started experiencing it differently, and that's when it occurred for me in a whole new way.
What are some of the things that happen for people? And I know you have a document that you send out to people interested in freedom coaching, interested in having coaching go even deeper than just business success, even though there's a relationship between the two. Um, what can a person look for as possibility for them if they come to you and work with you in freedom coaching?
Yeah, great question. Um, I noticed that it's different for everybody, but the common thread. So one of the, and then we'll talk about some specific examples. A common thread is it's a reorientation to who we truly are in our core, without limitations, without expectations or obligations, real or imagined, and it frees us up to follow the whisper of our calling, of our purpose. Even if you're not clear what that is, it helps to become more clear over time and help to take steps in that direction where we have and I'm going to speak for me first, I have more of an aliveness, more of an energy, without knowing all the details in the plan. It's that blend of faith and action, having faith and taking that next step in action, and things unfold as opposed to being controlled. So, specific examples, what people share with me is one comes to mind that I have a client that comes from Toronto, and in our very early on, it was in our actually in our first session that she, you know, she's a business leader. She's very proactive, very planned, very disciplined. She's got a lot of passion and a lot of heart. But she felt like she was using too much energy, too much effort to try to get where she wanted to go. And I helped her and I sat with her listening deeply where she was able to reorient and come through in a different way of experiencing the way she shows up, in the way that she shows up at work and the way she shows up at home turned out to be an overbearing of responsibility. And when she started letting go and seeing that she didn't choose that path, there was something from years ago, and we don't even know a pinpoint where it came from, but she, over the years, she started to see the pattern of this over responsibility that she's carried in her life. And at one time it was useful for her in her life, but now it was an old habit that no longer served her. And as she is now, she started to zoom out and see that. She's more creative. She's tapping more into her intuition. She's getting better results in her life without trying to get the results in her life, is the irony for her.
Yeah. Yeah, I know your work focuses on something deeper than just doing more or doing better. You go to the level of being. Can you talk about that? What's the advantage of that?
Yeah, the level of being for me is getting very clear on where I'm coming from, along with a context of what I'm living into. I'm never done being. It's not an accomplishment. It's a context. For me, it's a context. It's like my glasses. It's like when I don't have my glasses on, I can see. It's a little fuzzy, but when I have them on now, I have clarity of where I'm coming from and where I'm going. So for me, um, the context of being works in relation. So relationship example comes to mind. Even between my two oldest children, that there's a lot of conflicts taking place. They're almost 14 and 12, and there's a lot of conflict between them. And one saying might be like, "Oh, that's normal. Siblings will have frustrations and conflicts." Well, I don't believe that to be true. And a lot of the conflicts was coming one way from my daughter to my son. She was getting irritated by everything that he was doing. And we had a conversation, a slowed down conversation. And in that conversation, she realized that she didn't even give him a chance. It was all her past experiences. She remembered the frustrations that she had in interactions with him, and said, "Well, that's how you're showing up. That's how you're being. You're being that he doesn't, that he's going to frustrate you before he even does anything. So of course it's going to be frustrating." And so we tried an experiment where she every day for a week she wrote down three specific examples of things he did that she appreciated and why it mattered to her. Now she didn't share them with him. She wrote them down. She shared them with me because I just wanted to see how it was working for her. And we reflected on it after the 7 days, and she looked back at it and she says, "You know what, Dad? We didn't even have a single fight this week.
Wow.
We didn't." And she was blown away. I said, "Well, why do you think that is?" And she said, "Well, I've been looking at the ways that I appreciate him more, and I see that now." And we got to the point where even it was just last week, I saw the two of them go watch a show together
Wow.
downstairs. They have never done that. They have never done that, just the two of them go watch a show together downstairs. And they
Yeah.
even waited for each other when each other, they weren't both ready. So in the past, like, they wouldn't have wanted to do that. They wouldn't have waited for each other. They wouldn't have been compassionate and communicated in that way. And so this to me is in our household that's close to my heart, that is it was a great practice, and I'm sure there'll be many opportunities more to practice as we go, but it's a great practice to shift who we're being. What we look for and what we create intentionally gives the context of how I experience my relationships with the people around me.
Yeah. That's great. I know you're passionate about family life working, being workable, being loving and caring with all its imperfections, all the challenges that show up, but actually using the challenges as a portal to greater understanding of each other. And that also seems to have an effect when people start to be able to do it at home. It has an effect with their business colleagues, their customers and clients, their business partners. The whole internal system seems to shift, and that's kind of the freedom you're talking about in your coaching. You're not afraid to go there with people,
Right.
and I admire that about you. One thing you said that caught my attention. You talked about an early session with someone. I know your system of coaching people is you will almost always give people an early session or two so they get a direct experience of freedom coaching. They're not having to try to wrap their mind around it and think, oh, is that really possible for me? I'm locked in, I have a permanent personality, or I've got a difficult family. Um, but you give that time away up front. Tell me why you do that.
I do that because being and freedom coaching is not something I teach. There isn't a set of rules. There's no process. There's not, there aren't specific milestones on the journey. It's, and because everybody's situation is unique. And I want to honor each person's journey for where they are on the journey. And I want to hear what's going on with them and learn how the world occurs for them. I want to see what do they feel is working, what do they not feel is, what do they feel is not working. And so that experience helps it to be very personal. And it isn't, it's not something that I market and I'm sharing from the rooftops. I want to go in, and I love more intimate experiences where, we close the door or we go for a walk. Nobody else is here listening on this conversation. It's just the two of us having a conversation, going deeper into ways that that they wish they could have in their lives, and we find ways that they're inadvertently stopping themselves or talk themselves out of doing something they want to do. And it's this voice in the back of the head that, until we create a quiet enough environment that we feel safe enough to share what is going on back here. I always ask, create an agreement up front to say, hey, I in our time together, I'd love you to do two things if you're willing. Number one is tell on the voice. Anytime the voice starts talking and saying like, no, I can't do that, or this is not going to work, just call on it. Just say, hey, the voice is talking, and when we acknowledge that, it loses all its power over us. And then the other piece is to be curious, to be curious in what we don't know, and curious if there is another way of looking at it. And so when we approached it with that context, we're able to have a conversation that ordinarily you aren't able to have with other people in our lives, because other people are imposing their opinions and their judgments and what they would do. Here it's honoring that value of the person in front of me, that I believe they already know what to do when we get quiet enough to hear it.
I know from knowing you and having had the advantage of talking to a number of your clients one night when you had a client appreciation night, that people get happier when they work with you. Now, here's a question I have. Let's say I'm a tough type A male. I don't need to get happy. I need my profit to go up, or I need to turn my business around. I need to do this or that. Um, do is there a connection, a positive connection between if you become happier, more optimistic, um, more fun to talk to? Is there a connection between that and how one's business or career goes?
Yeah, I notice a very strong connection between it. That the higher, the more uplifted that one becomes, they start to see opportunities start to show up in their business that in previously they were trying to create. They were moving forward on trying to figure out. And while they might make some good progress on that, it seems to come in with very little effort. Things start to show up, and it it enables breakthroughs. I had a team actually very recently. It was about 3 weeks ago. where a founder owner that I'm working with in freedom coaching, he had a huge product line, one single product that was about to go away, and that product was a significant portion of their revenue. And he had a lot of fear-based thinking, and he was very, very stuck. He said anytime he's not with other people, his mind starts going and he gets very fearful. He even was telling me about, like, oh my gosh, are we going to have to file for bankruptcy? They were nowhere near bankrupt, but this is what his mind was going to. And he's like, oh my gosh, I got to figure out how to sell the building. I have to do all these other things. And so he was very contracted. And he said anytime you try to spend time with his kids, like, he would be playing with his kids, but his mind would be over there, like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? And so as we started working on this work with him, we started to see it's kind of like a pendulum. It's like when the pendulum, like when he's in this extreme area that of fear-based thinking, everything looks fearful.
Hmm. Yeah.
And he also has an appetite for the other extreme of doing really risky adventures too. And so when he's on there, he's in another extreme. And so what we realize is, like, for the best thinking to come in, it's in the middle. And as he got into the middle, more of thinking of just like, hey, what if we took those two things out? What if we took the fear out for a moment? We can pick it back up in a minute. We just set it aside. What would you do? How would you show up? And he had this answer that came forward that he was really relaxed, and it was very obvious to him what he would do and how he would show up. um, he's like, oh wow, like, I didn't realize that was in there. And so the more that, when he took that back and shared that with his team, he shared it with his leadership team. He even drew the same little pendulum diagram we drew on the board, and he took it back with them and helped them to understand where he was coming from. And he didn't realize that he was being so fearful in his business, and how that was disrupting their communications in between, how they were looking at trying to get out of the situation instead of seeing what they could create from it. And so since then, the product line didn't go away. It ended up getting extended. There is no termination date on it right now. And they created a couple other great ideas with the team of what they could do to leverage the extra space in their building, and they're continuing to create from that. So he's a lot more centered, a lot more positive, a lot more open. He says, the fear still comes up sometimes, but it's not as loud. It's not as loud. I don't pay as much attention to it.
Yeah, that's great. There are a lot of people, especially people who are really energized and working hard on their career, who feel it's kind of indulgent and scary even to look inside, to turn the camera around and look at how is this system of what I call me, how is it operating? How is it functioning? Am I getting the best from my innate creativity and my innate optimism I had when I was a kid? It takes a little bit of courage at the beginning, and but it pays such great dividends. I know from working with you over the years and the clients you've had, people who believe at the outset that they are permanent, hardwired. I'm this way. I don't do that well. I'm afraid of this. I like that. That it'll never change. That's just who they are. But our work proves otherwise. People are so changeable. And you use a process that I've observed when you talk to people, because we've been in groups together, that gives people some relaxation and safety to know that this is a very safe place to go. And that they can go as slowly as they like. It's not super confrontational like some therapists are, or some coaches are. What is that value? Why do you bring that willingness to slow people down, take baby steps, and see little things so they're not afraid to do this work, this internal work.
Yeah, I it's a great topic on the slowing down piece because I believe now, especially entrepreneurs, business owners, they're moving fast. And if
Yeah,
they're not physically moving fast, there's stuff going on upstairs in our mind that's moving so fast. And we miss the gold. We step over the gold that's underneath it. And so I know that in our sessions, I don't have I don't have to have the answers for them. I believe that they have them themselves if we slow down enough to hear put language to the thinking that we have, and you can actually speak it out. When we speak it out, it releases us. And I notice they end up hearing themselves often. They're like, wow, that's a little ridiculous. Why was I thinking that? I don't need to do that. Or they say, wow, that is a good idea. I was just afraid that all these other people, or I have a fear that these other people think that's ridiculous. And so as they start to speak that out, then we start working with that part of the conversation to make it doable for them. Because if they believe something doesn't take a Herculean effort and it's doable, and I just take the next step and I let it unfold from there, and I keep taking the next step, it keeps us in action. And that's even going back to the example that I shared with you about my client that had the fear-based thinking with that product line that was potentially going to go away. Um, that's what I've noticed over time is that through that element of safety and that quiet space, he's able to bring up stuff over time. We dealt with the real big issue, but now it's like the water level comes down. He starts to have these wonderings like, this leadership team member isn't seeming like they're jiving as well as I want them to. And we slowed down in the last session. It was just yesterday we slowed down and uncovered some dynamics that he hadn't seen before. And it's helping him to go back and have a really effective conversation with her on what is alignment on our team really mean, and helping him to have that conversation. So he couldn't even see that before because he was so caught up in everything going on in him. But now he's starting to dial in and help others and serve others in a different way in his team, and it's making it all more effective, faster.
yeah. It seems to me, looking back and knowing the work you do, that freedom coaching ultimately is freedom from fear, freedom from being stuck, freedom from being afraid of our own thinking. And once that goes away, people become unstoppable in the career world, and their family life gets better as well. When it looked like you can't do both, one is going to suffer if you pay attention to one. And you have turned that old superstition on its head with what you've done with your own family and how you've helped other people with families. And I know you and I could talk about freedom coaching for 8 more hours. And I don't want to put out an interview that's 8 hours long just yet. I may do it in the future. But is there anything else, any final word you have about freedom coaching that we haven't talked about that might be interesting for people listening to this?
Yeah, the the thing that comes to me is everything that I work on with my clients um, doesn't come with theory. It doesn't come from theory. It comes from my experience in my situation, what has occurred for me in working with you and working with Steve Hardison, and just seeing that when I thought there was no more, that this is my reality like this, it was like this. As you know, I, was an engineer in college and was very methodical, very safe, very calculated, very protective, very careful. And I didn't realize how much I was limiting myself. And I thought that's just the way it is. But through our work, you help to question for me and to break that paradigm over time, lovingly and gently, to help me to expand that for me. And that's been so impactful in my life. And that's my purpose, is to help others to focus on where they are already free. And when we focus on what we are where we are already free, that's what expands. Instead of focusing on the limitation, the lack, the stuckness, and trying to fix it, get rid of it, or move it, it's putting our attention on what is useful, and that's what grows. And that's what I found for me, and that's what I find in my work, helping others to do the same with whatever their situation is in dealing with it, whether it's like mine or not.
Well, that's great. I really appreciate you and congratulate you for the work you're doing and admire everything you're doing. And anyone lucky enough to work with you will understand everything we've been talking about here because it'll become reality for them, even though they're, like you say, distinct. You don't know ahead of time how the path will go, but it will go. So thank you so much. Mike Kotsis, my special guest today. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate you. Thank you so much.